so you don't forget. We're just gonna go to forms. Ta-da! All right.
Cool. Well, you know, this class is constantly evolving and changing. And so last time, instead of going through the questions that we ask, we just kind of jumped right into the form. That's probably, I got excited, I think.
You always get excited with contracts.
I do. So I think what would be good this time would be, let's go through the contract again, but let's take a harder look at the ancillary forms that we use as stipulated from the contract, or that we decide to add because it makes our offer more marketable to the seller.
Do you want me to pull up the residential first?
Let's pull up the residential first.
I wonder if I should just go into templates so I can have them all right there. Maybe
Okay.
not.
Well, I think the first form we'll talk about in more detail. And I was just thinking chronologically as we kind of go through the contract here. And the first thing we'll be dealing with, I mean, besides the buyer's agency agreement, I don't know if we need to bring that up. We're all pretty familiar with that one.
Ask them.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about the buyer's agency agreement and the new REF change to it?
I am not too firm on it just yet.
Okay, let's just pull it up real quick then.
The buyer agency, the agent, do you want me to go to the pamphlet?
Yep. Not the pamphlet, the actual agency agreement.
Agency, okay. We are working with buyers.
Great.
Come on.
So I'll just go through really quick on how you fill this form out. So the top part is going to be the real estate firm. They want to know, the state wants you to disclose that you work for Keller Williams Realty Portland Premier. So it should say Keller Williams Realty Portland Premier.
Don't forget the realty.
Yeah. If you can't fit that all there, I think you can. But if you can't, you can go KW. I think it's Portland. The thing that distinguishes us from other Keller Williams offices is the final. It says Keller Williams and then distinguishing us from there.
The DBA.
Realty Portland Premier.
Yeah, I think it's Keller Williams Realty.
Yeah.
And then Portland Premier.
Okay.
But that is the DBA. That is the business name. So you have to have it in full. I know we shorten it a lot, in the Facebook group and stuff like that to each other. And in our Slack channel is just KWPP. But legally, when you're doing anything document-wise or marketing, advertising-wise, you have to say Keller Williams Realty Portland Premier. Okay, sorry.
No, that's perfect. And then your name's going to go at line 3. Line 4 will be the principal agent's name. That's Kelly Diaz. You always put Kelly Diaz right there.
That's you.
For now, at least.
What do you mean for now?
Well, no. What I mean is, like, if we ever, as we grow and we add more principal brokers, then we will change the wording on that. And then the buyer's names go at line 5. And then the new section of this form is down here below. Okay, so it says buyers acknowledging they have received the Oregon Real Estate Agency's initial disclosure pamphlet required by the statute and have read and discussed with the buyer's agent the part of the pamphlet entitled Duties and Responsibilities of an Agent Who Represents More Than One Client in a Transaction. The initial agency disclosure pamphlet is hereby incorporated into this disclosed agreement by reference. And then you have a spot for initials. So it just further, there was already language to this effect in the previous form of it, but now they have to initial next to it to make it even more overkill that they've received it. The next section, and this is the biggest change here, is buyers having discussed with buyer's agents the duties and responsibilities of an agent who represents more than one party to a transaction consents as follows. A, buyer's agent, in addition to representing buyer, may or may not represent the seller in any transaction involving the buyer. And then the second part is B, buyer's agent, in addition to representing buyer, may or may not represent other buyers in making an offer on the same property as buyer. And you'll notice that the first buyer here, buyer is the one who's your client who will be addressing this form. And then lowercase buyers
is
for somebody else.
Yeah.
And then we go back again to the capitalized term of the buyer who's addressing this form. So I think I would want to have a conversation about this form prior to presenting it, because I think you're going to look kind of silly with number 2 there, buyer having discussed with buyer's agent the duties of and responsibilities. Having not had that conversation, I think it's going to look a little silly presenting this form. This is you're going to present this every single time that you are presenting an offer or creating an offer for your client. So I think question A and B are situational.
Right.
So it's going to change for every one of them. You know, if you have a listing and the buyer wants you to write an offer on it, the answer to A will be May, right? Because they're going to want you to write that offer. It gets a little bit more murky with B here, where they're choosing whether or not you get to represent another client or not.
How would you recommend they deal with having 2 buyers on one property?
I hate the idea of having 2 buyers on one property, so I think you need to refer one out.
Yeah.
And then write for the other one. The worst case scenario, the nightmare scenarios where you're representing the seller and you have 2 buyers who want to rent on a property. I think you should, in that case, probably refer them both out. I think just to keep it clean. I'm okay with dual agency, but when you start messing with that many buyers, it just gets kind of weird. And which offer wins and which offer doesn't is going to be really a problem for you. Could be a problem for you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please. That's what this is for.
And really, should we do something where we raise our hand wherever that icon is?
No, just speak up.
Okay, so where do we get a copy of the initial agency disclosure pamphlet?
It's in your zip form. So when you click on all forms, and I typed in the word agency under the Oregon real estate forms, the pamphlet is right here.
All right, so do we need to print that out and give it to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every time.
The Oregon Real Estate Agency feels like that's probably the most important form in the entire document, the entire
Okay.
It talks about.
That's why we address it. It's addressed like 7 times.
Oh, yeah.
I'm exaggerating, but it's addressed here and then addressed on the offer, at the top of the offer.
Yeah.
So.
Super, super important. Read through it. That's one thing that you did learn in your real estate studies that you will need to know.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the 4 or 5.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and I always present this before the offer. So if I'm sending a DocuSign package out to be signed,
It's first.
the pamphlet's first, this form's second.
Yep.
Always. Okay.
And then you can have them, contact you when they get it, if they want to go through it and talk about it, or you can talk about it to them before you send it over to them. Let them know what's on it. And then if they had any questions, they can reach back out to you or.
If I work with a client for the first time, second time, I don't know how many times.
You're going to go through that right away.
Well, not just that, but like when I present the offer to them, I send it over for them to DocuSign. I don't usually just eject and then don't give them anything. I'll say, hey, would you like to go over the offer before you sign it? They'll probably say yes. At which point I'll go through it with them and go through the entire offer, not just this, but the entire offer with them over the phone while they're looking at it, so they understand what we're talking about.
Which is another reason why we go over these forms all the time and tell you guys, go through, read them, make sure you understand. So if they do ask a question, you're not fumbling, and we really don't want to say, I'll get back to you, because you should know it's right there.
Right. How does section 10 work? Or what's 5.2 mean? Whatever these things, like they're going to ask you this question, you need to
Print a copy and keep it in your pocket.
And then we just scroll down to what's that?
So Kelly, you said, which one would you do first and then this one second?
The pamphlet always first.
Yes.
The initial agency disclosure pamphlet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I see. I'm sorry. I thought you meant a different pamphlet. Okay.
No, I always send that pamphlet first, and then it's just in the order of delivery that you set up in DocuSign. That's always the first one I want them to see in the package of forms they have to sign.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then down the bottom of that is where the seller and the buyer and you're going to sign. So so you're signing down here as well, right? Because if these don't work for you, like if line 21, 22, 23, 24, if those don't work for you, then you won't sign this, and you probably won't have an offer direct.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Which form?
Let's go back to the actual offer itself.
The offer.
You've already got it loaded up.
Does it?
You can click my forms on the left, upper left.
Usually never use this.
All right, so we'll scroll back down through here. I think the next one we should talk about is escalation clause, because the next real thing we're talking about is price. So let's pull up the escalation clause and talk about how we fill that out real fast.
The escalation clause is a KWPP form that Kelly did.
Actually, I did not make this one. This one was here before.
What? You edited it?
No, I
No?
haven't edited it.
What?
It's one thing I could edit it, I just haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Okay, so the following is part of the purchase and sale agreement dated, boom, between buyer and seller concerning the address, right? And then
Mhm.
competing offer. So competing offer means a bona fide arm's length offer for the property under comparable terms and conditions that has not expired or been withdrawn when this offer is accepted. The net amount of a competing offer shall be the stated amount or the maximum amount if the competing offer contains a price escalation clause, less any seller credits or other price adjustments such as credits for buyers' closing costs. So that right there is we're trying to identify the terms of which a competing offer fits and then how that affects the purchase price. So if the competing offer is contingent upon the sale of another house, then I think that it is probably not comparable terms and conditions. It's very vague, but I think it's probably not comparable terms and conditions. And then the next part here is where we're talking about credits. So like if one offers $500,000, but they're asking for $10,000 credits, that's a net $490,
Right.
right?
So
So
they
that
offer-
$490 number will be the basis for the escalation, okay? Purchase price, the seller has received a competing offer for the property and a net amount greater than the equal amount of this offer, then the purchase price of this offer shall be increased by an amount of, there's a blank here, and that number should be
The increment.
it's in the increment of the escalation, and it should be, I think it should be a considerable amount. I mean, it needs to move the dial on the offer. Okay, more than the net amount of any other competing offer, up to a maximum price of, and this is a lid. So if your clients are willing on a $500,000 house, let's say they want to spend $5,000 more than the next highest offer, but they can't qualify for more than $550. So $550 would be your number here, or whatever it is, the maximum amount that they're willing to spend. That's that number that goes there. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's really pretty simple. The bottom part here of this is it's a part that we don't use as much as we should, and I've seen it been a little confusing on what people talk about. So let's go down to the bottom and talk about how we complete this. So this section is likely going to be filled out by the seller's agent. Okay, so in here they're going to put the competing offer amount, and then down here will be like if there's any closing costs, that's what that would be. And then, so that gives us the net of the competing offer, and then our escalation is 5,000, making the final purchase price $445. So I see people using a separate addendum to announce the sales price as well. That's fine in lieu of this. I do like this better because it's a little bit more concise, and it's a little bit more it's more what's the word I'm looking for? Not vulnerable. It's
That's more
it's
precise.
apparent. I mean,
right?
I guess it just shows everybody what the
Yeah.
price, what the offer was. It
Then-
shows
then-
all the math behind it.
Then there's no confusion over it, right?
Exactly. Right. So no one can say, oh, this wasn't the amount. So
Right.
I do like filling at the bottom of this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one question, Kelly, that I've had
Yeah.
different people ask about the seller's acceptance. So it says the seller shall shall deliver a complete copy of the competing offer to the buyer along with the seller's acceptance of this offer.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? Can they send you one with everything crossed out? Does it need to be completely
So
exposed?
per the terms of this agreement, it would be completely exposed. I think I would have a discussion with my client, my seller client, or my
Yeah.
buyer client, whichever.
Right,
In this case, my buyer client, and just say, hey, I don't think we'll probably get a redacted copy.
right.
And that's kind of the industry standard, and that's fine. That's the part of this form.
Because they don't want to give you their other
Right.
people's
Yep,
names.
yeah, that's the change on this form I'd like to make, is to add the term redaction in there, but it's a little more complicated than just changing the document. But yes, and for me personally, like in my buyers, they've always been fine with a redacted copy. It makes sense why there's a redacted copy. So you're not giving out everybody's names.
So either way is fine.
Either way is fine. If when I'm working with a seller, what I usually do is I redact everything. And I even go down to the bottom where it says the licensing of the agent's name. I don't want them to know who the agent is.
Right.
Or the buyer, and I don't
Right.
want, you know, what company they're from, so I redact all that stuff.
Yeah.
License number, redact anything that could possibly lead back to that buyer.
What's the easiest way to redact everything?
Black
Print.
pen.
Print and marker, right?
Yeah, black pen.
And then scan it back to
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, Dotloop used to have a great feature. You just put a blue
I
white block on
know.
the top of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions on the escalation? No.
All right, let's move on.
Whoops. Let me go back to the purchase and sales agreement.
Okay.
Wrong one. There we go.
Okay. Our next stop will be the new OREF 097, FHA Federal VA mandatory clause. Has anybody online here, have you ever completed an FHA transaction before or a VA transaction?
No.
No,
Okay, so as part of that, an addendum will come from the lender that will be very similar to this. The wording is probably identical to this, but the idea is, and it kind of reiterates some things that are in section 5.1 of our sale agreement, that the property must qualify for a loan and it must be sold. It's a contingent upon the appraisal coming in at the purchase price. This form essentially says the exact same thing, but it's in an addendum that's presented at the time of the offer. And I think the point behind this, and hopefully the FHA and VA will start recognizing this form and we'll have to sign another document. It might take a while for us to catch up to that. But what I like about using this form now instead of later is it reiterates that that is mandatory, that this form is going to be required to be signed by the buyer and seller in order to close the loan.
Yeah.
And contrary terms, like appraisal gap coverage, don't really work with this. You guys understand that?
yeah,
No. I
No?
understand appraisal gap. Why doesn't it work with this?
Because this says that the sale is contingent upon the property qualifying for financing
Yes, right, okay, yes.
and appraising for the purchase price. So, yeah,
So if it doesn't appraise for the purchase price, the buyer does not have to purchase the property.
yeah. So let's just read through this so you guys can, let's read through this so you guys can read it once. It is expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provision of the contract, the purchaser shall not be obligated to complete the purchase of the property described herein or incur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money deposits or otherwise, unless the purchaser has been given in accordance with the HUD, FHA, or VA requirements, a written statement by the Federal Housing Commissioner, Department of Veteran Affairs, or direct endorsement lender setting forth the appraised value of the property of not less than the contract purchase price. The purchaser shall have the privilege and option of proceeding with the consummation of the contract without regard to the amount of the appraised valuation. The appraised valuation is arrived at to determine the maximum mortgage the Department of Housing and Urban Development will ensure. HUD does not warrant the value or condition of the property. The purchaser should satisfy him, herself, that the property and condition of the property are accessible. And then there's a VA clause down below it, which is very similar. So the seller, the buyer may change, they may decide upon a low appraisal, they may decide that they will come into closing. I just don't think, I mean, you know, in contract law, you know, the last thing to sign is the last thing that changes the contract. So let's say you have this signed and agreed upon, and then an appraisal gap coverage signed and agreed on at the same time. I think they're conflicting. I think that this probably wins out. And so maybe down the line for like, you know, once it goes into contract, you could change it. But even then, I just think that this clause is going to override that.
And they have to sign a similar clause at closing.
Yeah, it's signed, yeah. You're right, they have to sign it again at closing.
Mhm.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good it's upfront. I think it adds a lot of clarity to the process. And that you can't really use it in gap coverage on a VA or FHA loan.
Right, and maybe then that's a conversation that they need to talk to their lender,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
see if they could qualify for a different type of loan, if they are anticipating having an appraisal gap on a property.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, they can use the gap. We just can't enforce it. As a seller's agent, you can't enforce it. The buyer may, in good faith, put the appraisal gap coverage out there and say they're going to do it and follow through with it. There's no enforcement of it.
Right,
All right,
okay,
let's go back to.
Tanya,
yes,
when you say they anticipate, that somebody might anticipate an appraisal gap, how can you really do that? I mean,
if you're writing an offer on a property that's listed at 450 and they're gonna go to 500 and you can't find comps to show that the appraiser is gonna be able to find comps, then most likely it's not gonna appraise at 500.
okay,
So then you have to have that conversation that, number one, do they wanna pay over
Mhm.
what
much over.
a potential appraisal is? Because some people will, cash buyers will, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Conventional loans will.
Yeah, so this is one of the holes, this is one of the weak points of FHA and VA financing is this document itself.
Mhm.
The benefits of it are there's a loan requirements for the FHA are really lenient. You can borrow more money on an FHA loan based upon your income than you can on a conventional loan. VA is great because you don't have to put anything down, but their side effects are they aren't as marketable to the seller.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's continue onward. So I think we were not too many
Right
ancillary forms
here,
here.
termination,
Yeah, we can do that later. Let's
okay.
talk about termination a little bit later. No, nothing here that we're gonna use very often. Let's look at the buyer's repair addendum.
Ooh. Whoops. Buyer's repair addendum. Okay, I have to click that twice. That drives me crazy.
Okay, so it used to be mandated. They changed the form that we use this document. I did not used to like to use it, but I've come around on it. There's things I like about it. And I just want to go through the document really quick and talk about how I use it. Presentation of this addendum to seller shall not constitute a counteroffer or refusal to buy by buyer to honor the terms of the existing sale agreement. Note, buyer should promptly deliver this repair addendum to seller. Since there is no deadline for seller's acceptance of this proposal, the parties may wish to consider a written extension of any applicable inspection periods. It's funny that they,
Yeah.
by the way, I just noticed a typo. They have a parentheses, they never close the parentheses.
Ah,
That's funny.
it's ongoing. No.
Okay, so what that's saying is it's just a reminder that the inspection period ends, and once it ends, the buyer's right to negotiate is kind of gone because they've lost the ability to terminate the transaction.
Mhm.
Okay, buyers, and this is kind of why I like it. I like some of this language right here. So buyer requests seller to perform the following repairs and or take other corrective actions. And now they've given us a capitalized term that we can use throughout the transaction called repairs/corrective actions. They refer to everything agreed upon that the seller decided, the buyer negotiated together. So I love that. It makes it easy for you to refer to it. Described as follows. Note, seller may request a copy of any inspections upon which the following items are based. If the completion date for the repairs corrective actions is beyond the scheduled closing date, the party should identify a new closing date as a part of this addendum. Buyer shall not provide all or any portion of the inspection report to seller unless requested. Okay, so one, I like the language here because it kind of gets you started on writing your addendum. I also like that it's a reminder about the inspection reports that not to be shared unless requested.
Mhm.
And then also like the new closing date part here, that doesn't get done very often. It should, but it can be difficult. Nobody wants to push the closing date out as they're negotiating repairs, everybody wants to deal with that later, and I can understand why. Okay. So down here, lines 12 through 21, or 12 through 20, is where we're going to put our repairs / corrective actions that we're going to request the seller to make. I like the format's great. If you need an additional addendum, you can add it here. You can add it up here if you want as well. But I think that's really important. And then down here, Bart, again, I like this, more warnings, which I like. Warning: if the inspection period specified in the inspection section applicable to this sale agreement or section 1 of OREF 058, professional inspection addendum if used in this transaction, is not properly extended, if buyer fails to deliver written unconditional disapproval of buyer's inspection report by 5 p.m. on the last day of the inspection period, buyer shall be deemed to have accepted the condition of the property. Unless otherwise provided above, all repairs, corrective actions requiring the use of contractors, e.g. for electrical, HVAC, plumbing, or similar specialty work, shall be performed by an Oregon licensed and bonding contractors in a workmanlike manner in accordance with all applicable loads, codes, ordinances, and shall be paid by the seller prior to closing date or at closing. So that last sentence, albeit long, is loaded with great stuff for your client, because you don't have to say work to be done by a licensed contractor,
It's already
work to be done in a workmanlike fashion, work to be done prior to closing. It's all here already. So it's all boilerplated in. It's perfect. No need to change it. That just lets you get to the nuts and bolts of the repair request without having to put a bunch of other minutia in there. So I love that. This is very useful. I also, again, like the warning about 5 p.m. on the last day of the inspection period.
Yeah.
Okay. The repairs / corrective actions shall be completed on or before a date. I like to put like probably 3 business days prior to closing. Have a discussion with your client. Maybe there's a reason why they would want it done sooner. It's difficult in our current market to get repairs done quickly. It's always a problem, but especially right now when people are doing so many, the materials are on backlog,
Oh, yeah.
and then contractors are super busy because everybody's remodeling. But anyway, so repairs corrective action should be completed on or before the completion date. Again, they made another capitalized term here in case you need to use that later. The completion date can be used later. Seller shall give buyer written notice of completion of repairs, corrective actions, and provide any receipts for labor and materials with proof of payment in full, unless being paid out of escrow. Buyer may, with buyer's inspector, within blank business days, following receipt of such notices, re-inspect the property to confirm the repairs, corrective actions have been completed. Again, I love all this stuff. It provides more information and more detail and more direction than you'll be able to write out on your own addendum. So just use this because it really handles it all for you. But it gives the written payment, it gives the receipts, the proof of payment,
Yep.
and the ability to re-inspect. And it says here, and we had a discussion about this the other day, but I think
Yeah.
we may be going to it again. Buyer may, with buyer's inspector, within 2 business days, following receipt of such notice, re-inspect the property. So buyer may with buyer's inspector. That means they got to go together in tandem.
Yeah, and usually it will cost. Inspectors will charge to go back out again.
Mhm.
So you need to have that conversation with your buyers, letting them know if you want to go back out and inspect, the inspector has to go. We need to get it scheduled, and it will cost.
I think it's
What
usually about
cost?
$200, 100 to 200, something
Yeah,
like that.
depending on your
So
inspector.
I guess what the repair is it worth it to have that person come out or not?
Right.
But I think it's a good idea. If it's extensive repair, it's a good idea to have it done. Make sure though that what you write as far as what you want to be repaired will match what the inspector is going to come back and look at, right? So you want to
Right.
make sure that you're describing a scope of work that's actually going to cause that's going to fix a problem, and make sure that your inspector, when he's reviewing it, is reviewing based upon what you wrote, not upon what he wrote, because they may not be exactly the same. Okay, and then below here's a spot for the seller to agree or not to, or to decline, and then they have a seller's repair addendum that is very, very similar to this one. It just changes the names around a little bit, but plays exactly the same.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions on that form or how to use it? Let's go back up to the middle body here. So line 21, for additional details, see addendum blank. So if I'm going to make a repair request and ask for a credit, I'm gonna put the repair requests on this form. And then on my addendum is where I'm gonna have the credit
Right.
on a separate form. The lender doesn't want to necessarily see these repairs. So but they do need to see the credit. So you need to have a separate addendum for that. And make sure you put the addendum here. And on that addendum, you don't need to say anything beyond, you don't have to remove the inspection contingency or anything like that.
No.
On that addendum, you just want to say seller to credit buyer, X amount towards buyer at closing towards buyer's lender allowable closing costs and prefit expenses. There is a part in here. Let's go down below further.
Down or up?
Right here. Okay. Seller agrees to perform the repairs corrective actions on or before the completion date and would give a timely notice therefore to buyer. Note if seller checks this box, the inspection period shall automatically terminate. So if you send this form over and the seller agrees to it, the inspection period's over.
Yeah. Can't
Okay.
keep asking for more stuff.
Yep. Even if you have 2 days left in your inspection period,
It's over.
yep, that box is checked and signed here, over.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go to the termination form now, because I think that this
Sure
plays
does.
right into,
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oops. I gotta get on the right keys.
so most of the time when you're terminating, probably 9 times out of 10, I see terminations are revolving around the inspection period, okay? And so you're getting, this document here addresses the termination. So it says, the parties now want to terminate the real estate sale agreement as follows. Buyer and seller hereby terminate the real estate sale agreement and release each other from all other obligations thereunder except. So if anything were to survive the expiration of that, it would be listed here. I can't think of anything that you really would do that. I can't think of a scenario where I would use this, but someday I'm sure we will. Buyer acknowledges seller is authorized to sell and convey the property to a third party purchaser. So as soon as
the buyer signs
as
it.
soon as the buyer signs this, they're giving seller permission to sell to anybody else, no matter what. Matter if there's earnest money in dispute, whatever it is, now they authorize them to sell. The first party signing and delivering this termination agreement to the other party may withdraw its signature at any time prior to signing and delivery of the termination agreement by the other party to such first party. Does that make sense? So if your buyer directs you to complete this form to terminate the sale, and before the seller signs it, they change their mind because maybe there's another agreement that they come to another agreement, then you can just rescind this form and move forward. Down at the bottom, let's jump back. Can we jump back to the purchase agreement right now? And let's go down to section 10.
Whee.
Okay.
Down a little bit further.
This is good.
Unconditional.
Okay, so right here, starting at line 182. However, at any time during this transaction or promptly following, no, that's not it. Okay, unless written agreement, this is at one line for those on 185, line 185 is where we're starting. Unless a written agreement has already been reached with seller regarding buyer's requested repairs at any time during this inspection period, buyer may notify seller in writing of buyer's unconditional disapproval of the property based on any inspection reports, in which case all earnest money deposits shall be promptly refunded and this transaction shall be terminated. Okay, let's go back to the termination agreement.
Oops, I did it again. Oops, I wish I had that song on.
Mhm.
Austin, where are you?
Okay, so is there any part in this agreement where it says that the buyer has unconditionally disapproved of the inspection reports? Is that stated in here anywhere?
No.
It's not.
It just says it's terminated.
It just says it's terminated. So you're terminating the transaction, but you haven't used a clause to terminate. You're just terminating it.
Right.
And that could put your client's earnest money in jeopardy. So in concert with this form, we should always cite a term that we are terminating the transaction based upon. And that could be a term that's already created. It's like a form that's already been created for us to use it. Notice a buyer's unconditional disapproval right here. Or it could be an addendum where you're citing the term from the contract, where you can use a general addendum and just use verbatim what the term in the contract is, because it will spell it all out. Just essentially copy and paste, say buyer hereby, and then you would put unconditionally disapproves of inspection reports. Then now you've cited a term. Now you're using the termination agreement, and then back on the termination agreement down below, because we cited the term and we're within the timeframes and within the bounds of the bindings of the contract, we can now retain our client's earnest money, and we're going to fill out this portion here to tell escrow where that earnest money should go. So they ask for the escrow transaction number. If you have that, put it in there. If not, it's not the end of the world. The above escrow agent is instructed to cancel the above referenced transaction and to disperse funds on deposit in the sum of, that's the total earnest money amount, or other consideration as follows, which is never probably going to be used unless there's somebody putting a car up or something for collateral. We don't do that. And then the disbursement instructions would be $5,000 party, and then you put the buyer's name right there. If they were going to split it somehow, you put that in here. But with this form, because you've done everything right, your client's going to retain their earnest money, and that's how you're going to do it. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Let's keep cruising through the purchase agreement.
Purchase agreement. Did you want to look at this one?
Yeah, we can look at this one. So this one, the notice of buyer's unconditional disapproval, says everything that it needs to do and then some. Only part about this I don't like is the last day of the inspection. I don't mind this part here. It's down here. The earnest money deposits held in the transaction will be promptly returned to buyer on the blank insert date. This notice was delivered to seller or seller's broker. Like, I think you could probably format this through DocuSign to state the time and date it's delivered, but it's really hard to state what time something's gonna be delivered when you haven't delivered it yet.
Right.
But it hasn't been signed yet when you're filling this thing out. So that's a part of this form I don't like. But I guess this part's nice where it's like you're handing it off to them, or there's a fax number, which no one's using obviously, or an email address. Like, I guess this all makes sense to have that in there. But we have digital records of everything we do. So I just feel like this is all a little silly. That's why I don't actually use this form.
Oh, here it kind of corrects it right here. Notice shall be deemed delivered as of the date, time of personal delivery or electronic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like line 18, adjust line 12 through 14. I know it's all just madness to me. I just like one form stating, I just use it, for me, I always just use a blank addendum and I write out the words from the inspection period, contingency itself, seller hereby, buyer hereby. Yep. So pursuant to, you can just use the top of this if you wanted to. But anyways, I just use the inspection, the buyer hereby unconditionally disapproves inspection reports. That does it all. You don't have to go into this whole form. Okay. What else?
We're getting there. Do you want to look at the?
Do you want to look at the
Inspection
alternative
agenda?
inspection procedures? Yeah.
Sure, we talked about it. Don't always go there, right?
Yeah. So this form let's start down at the bottom here.
The bottom.
Yeah. So all of this here is essentially the exact same as it is in the purchase agreement. Time is of the essence. Buyer needs additional time. Buyer should immediately attempt to secure seller's written consent of an extension before expiration of the time period described below. The time period agreed upon below will be shortened or extended only by written agreement between buyer and seller. So buyer shall have 10 business days after the date buyer and seller have signed and accepted the sale agreement. And they name it the inspection period, so it's exactly like an other agreement, other form, in which to complete all inspections and negotiations with sellers regarding matters disclosed and performed by buyer or buyer's behalf. Buyer shall not provide all or any portion of the inspection report to seller unless requested. Seller, however, at any time during the transaction or promptly following termination upon request by seller, buyer shall promptly provide a copy of such reports. So this is like word for word same meaning as what we're using in the section 10 and the inspection period, boilerplate written out on the purchase agreement.
The rest of it's all the same.
Yeah, it's
So
really
it's
all
just
exactly the same.
this.
But the difference is the middle here, where we're, instead of having to list out on line what inspections we're gonna do, we're gonna check boxes, and we're gonna say who's paying for what. So, this can be really handy. I guess, I mean, imagine, I can't really imagine it, but maybe it's a scenario where I'm not sure why this would be accepted. But let's say, your client wants to have an inspection done, but doesn't want to pay for it. Try to get the seller to pay for it here, like maybe a survey or something like that would be something that maybe you request to have done if there's some sort of, it's like there's something impeding on the lot line. Sewer scope, I mean, underground tank, I don't know, is there a septic part on this one?
No, but we should go to that. Should we go
We'll
to
go
those
that
two
way.
forms?
We'll go that one, we'll do the septic and well
Because we haven't done those.
Yeah. So, well, what's great about this is you can just check off the boxes, and typically
Yep.
nobody cares what boxes you check.
Yep.
Like I've seen, as many times as I've seen this form, I see every box checked as often as I see like 2 boxes checked. And so I think you can get away with asking for a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, you can do it, you can not do it,
Mhm.
right? Hit or miss.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it operates exactly the same as our inspection period and the purchase agreement.
It's a good form to go to if you want, if you can't remember which invasive inspections you might need to do, you can pull up this form and there they are,
Yeah,
right?
perfect.
All right.
Okay, let's just go straight to the septic on-site well. Yeah, well, sorry.
Well, first,
Yep.
I'm gonna pull, wait, hold on, I'm gonna pull them up. So we have them both. All right, there's the septic first.
Okay, so if,
When would you have a septic? In
could
case we
be,
have people who don't know,
could be anywhere.
right?
I mean, there's houses in neighborhoods in Lake Oswego that are on septic tanks. They're in Tigard, they're in Gladstone, they're not so much in Portland, Hillsborough, they're all over the place. If it's rural property, it's likely on septic as opposed to sewer.
Right.
So, so as you're going through your purchase agreement, there's a line, it's part of the contingency section after the inspections where you're checking a box, whether or not the property is on a well, or if it's on public water, or if it's on on-site sewage system or a community sewage system.
Yeah.
And so you'll be directed to use these forms if you say that it is on a on-site septic system, or if it is on a well. And so what we're doing on here is we're creating a contingency with which to inspect the septic system. We're putting the timelines here. I typically just go with the boilerplate timelines in here. It's saying, so seller agrees to provide buyer with all written documentation regarding the on-site sewage system, including all inspections, testings done within the last 6 months, existing maintenance contracts for the on-site sewage system, which may be a DEQ requirement for a sand filter or alternative technology system, and any other material information regarding the system within blank business days after buyer and seller have both signed and accepted this agreement. So the reason why a sand filter or alternate technology system might be required to have on a treatment system is because they are usually, a sand filter system is used on a much smaller lot, and failures to that system could affect the other lots around it in a much higher rate because it's a smaller and more condensed system. So like if you were building a house somewhere and you only had an acre, they may require you to use a sand filter system as opposed to like a traditional septic system.
So here it says inspections, tests, pumping, cleaning,
Mhm.
other.
Yep.
And it offers both people can pay it.
Yep,
So what do
yep.
you normally see, Kelly?
So there's traditions. Typically the buyer is going to pay for the inspection and the seller is going to pay for the pumping of the waste.
Which is done at the same time.
Typically you're gonna do them at the same time. You want to coordinate that with the listing agent probably, because if they're living in the house, they pump the tank and then you can't get your guy out there for like 3 days. The tank could be, a little bit more full. If there's a break in the tank, water could be seeping into it and filling back up. And then you won't actually be able to see, your inspector won't be able to see the inside of the tank. The point of the pumping is so the inspector can see the inside of the tank, looking for, much like in a sewer scope, looking for root balls, looking for cracks, looking for issues with it. The other thing that people inspect sometimes, and this is probably a good idea because they fail more than the tanks do. The tanks are kind of foolproof. It's either leaking or it's not leaking. There's not much to it. But the distribution boxes are a big deal. When they get clogged, then the tank backs up and then it backs back up into the house. So
Ew.
yeah. So have a discussion, if you're purchasing a property, your clients are purchasing a property on a septic system, have a quick discussion with them about the inspections. Digging up the distribution boxes, and I could draw a picture of, I don't know, how familiar you guys with septic systems and how they work? I'll take that as not familiar.
Yeah, not really familiar with them.
Okay,
Shall I try to find a picture?
yeah, let's try to find, there should
Here,
be one
I'll do
online.
that over here. Okay.
Yeah. So what happens, usually you have 1,000-gallon tank. And so a toilet flushes, the waste runs through the pipes down to the septic tank and goes in. I think it usually comes in the top and then floats there at the bottom. Nature happens and there's some decomp. Here we go. There's some decomp, and once the water level gets high enough, it starts draining out into what they call the leach lines. But before it gets to the leach lines, that little square box you see that's a distribution box. And if those get clogged because the waste floating at the bottom floats into the lines and clogs up this, then that fills up, can't drain, backs up back into the house. Does that help you guys at all?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so one of the costly things though about inspecting the distribution boxes is finding them and digging for them, because your client's probably gonna pay about $100 an hour to dig and about $100 an hour to find. And so you can get what's called an as-built drawing from the city, but it's usually a hand sketch and it's not gonna be super duper precise,
Yeah.
but it may be worth it. So something to talk to your clients about.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was fun. Well, or do you want to go through this?
Okay, so there's contingencies tied to this that are very similar to the inspection period. Buyer shall have blank business days after receipt of any written reports regarding the septic system, including but not limited to location, condition, the system. Now we're naming it here and after the system contingency period to notify the seller in writing of buyer's disapproval of the inspection report, in which case all earnest money deposits shall promptly be refunded and this transaction shall be terminated. If buyer fails to provide seller with written disapproval by 5 p.m. on the final day of the set forth above, buyer shall be deemed to have accepted it as is. Condition of the no, if prior to expiration of the above written agreement is reached with seller regarding buyer's request, change, or repairs, the above period shall be automatically terminated unless parties agree otherwise. Can you go back up to just put this together? Buyers shall be deemed to have accepted the, okay.
Go back down.
The condition of the system. Note, if prior to expiration of the above period, written agreement is reached with seller regarding the buyer's request to change the repairs above period. Yeah. So if there's a repair negotiated, automatically terminates. So this works just like the inspection period. If you're using this clause to terminate a transaction, remember we need to use a termination document, and then we need to go back up here and just put an unconditional approval of.
Go back up.
No,
Oh.
just stay right here. So I just
Okay,
noticed it.
sorry.
Buyer's unconditional disapproval of the system based upon any written reports. So you would say in your addendum, buyer unconditionally disapproves of the system, of the septic system. I put that in there. Septic system based upon any written reports. And maybe I would even start with, if you could go up, I would say, maybe I would just write like, I go system contingency period hyphen, dash, buyer hereby unconditionally disapproves of the system and hereby terminates this transaction.
Right.
So 2 addendums to make sure you're getting your point across properly. All right, let's go on to the well form.
The well form.
Seller represents to buyer, to the best of seller's knowledge, A, the domestic well has provided an adequate supply of water to the property throughout the year for household use, and B, the water is fit for human consumption. And C, the continued use of the well and water complies with all applicable state and federal laws. No other representations are made concerning the well and well water supply, except for as expressly stated elsewhere in this agreement by seller. Okay, so that's the beginning.
Should we go back up to number 4 though?
Oregon law, if this transaction includes a well that supplies domestic water to the property, Oregon law requires seller shall have the well tested for arsenic, nitrates, and total chloroform bacteria. For more information, see the Oregon.gov website. Anyways, so the seller is going to do a water quality test regardless of what your buyer wants to do. They're required to by Oregon law.
No.
I've read into this a little bit. We had a situation where weren't able to do this, and it was kind of a weird thing that it's not really important right now. Anyways, sorry, my mind's just going. So there's a seller representation, seller duties within blank business days. After buyer and seller signed and accepted this agreement, seller shall have the seller's cost. Order well water sample collecting by a registered sanitarian, certified water systems operator, well driller, pump installer, or lab tech prior to the treatment, and testing ordered with a laboratory accredited according to the Oregon Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program. So someone's gonna come out and pull that water sample. Usually, again, you do this in concert with what's called a well flow test, okay? And so let's go down to here. So when I represent a buyer, I usually I'm already looking for the well log prior to. If anybody ever needs help finding a well log, I can send you the website and give you a hint on how to find them. They can be really difficult to find. They're filled out by contractors. There is kind of a mandated form, but they're all filled out a little bit differently because sometimes they don't have a property address yet by the time they're digging the well. So it can be difficult and hard to find them. But I would always ask for the well log, test reports. Every time I would check both those boxes just in case they have one. And then buyer testing within blank business days. After buyer and seller have signed this agreement, buyer may.
Tanya, under the seller testing, what are other reports? What other reports might there be? I have no experience with this.
No idea.
I've
Okay,
done a lot, and it's usually just the well. You want to know about the well, and then the well test. You want to know how much water is flowing per minute.
Yeah.
Those are the base.
But that'd be covered
Tests.
that'd be covered under line 28, well work test
Yeah.
reports. So I can't think of another report.
okay.
You have to have something in mind. It says specify, so.
You'd have to know exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. But those are the
So,
base ones.
but
that
well
I
test
looked at.
reports would be a flow test, would be something you could put in there.
Right,
So the important things here to make sure, I think it's really important to do a flow test. I always encourage my clients to do a 4-hour flow test
yeah.
to see how much the water level changes in the well, and then how much water is being provided. That's the point of that test. Additional arsenic, nitrates, and total chloroform bacteria. I mean, they're already saying they're gonna do that, but
If the buyers want to do their own.
yeah, lead test, that's one. Additional water quality test. The labs have a whole bunch of stuff they can test for. So talk to your client about what they want.
Yeah, they have specific things they might be allergic to.
You're right. It could be something very specific they're looking for.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. And then I would never click none because unless they're planning on drilling their own well, I probably wouldn't put
Right.
that. But otherwise definitely do a flow test. Again, I like a 4-hour flow test.
yeah, for sure.
And then same thing here. We have a termination. I'm trying to find the exact wording on it. Buyer and seller may negotiate a written agreement as to the method, cost, and financial responsibility for correcting substantial deficiencies identified by buyer. If the parties are unable or timely reach a written agreement on the last day of the negotiation period, all earnest money deposits shall be. Okay, so let's start with the beginning of this one. So buyer's right to termination. Within 5 business days after buyer's receipt of all written reports from buyers and sellers test, buyer shall have the absolute right to terminate this transaction by delivering to seller A, written notice of intent to declare termination together with a list of substantial deficiencies identified by buyer, and B, copies of all test reports received by buyer.
So that would be actually delivered.
Yeah, this is completely contrary to the other inspection periods. Upon delivery, buyer and seller may negotiate a written agreement as to the method, cost, and financial responsibilities for correcting the substantial deficiencies identified by buyer. If the parties are unable to timely reach a written agreement by 5 PM on the last day of the negotiation period, all earnest money deposits shall probably be refunded to the buyer. And this transaction shall be terminated, notwithstanding the proceeding. Buyer shall have no obligation to reach any agreement with seller during the negotiation period. So this will automatically terminate sale. So if you deliver that, if you're delivering, what's different about this inspection period is we're not necessarily doing a negotiation, at least as written. We're not necessarily doing a negotiation throughout the period and then terminating. You're initiating the termination process by issuing the addendum requesting repairs. So it's a lot different. So if you're going to put something in writing about, seller to install a new pump, know that you've triggered the termination clause in this, and that the clock is ticking on getting this deal done. So you can't ask for it and then say, just kidding. It doesn't say that in here. So
But it does
I mean,
say
you
that-
could say written agreement.
It does say that the buyer doesn't have to reach any agreement with the seller.
Yeah, it does say that all parties are unable to timely reach a written agreement. So written agreement would be like,
Yeah.
I changed my mind, would be a written agreement.
Yeah.
So, like, you put that in writing, but what's
We
that?
have 2 minutes.
We have 2 minutes. I think we're perfect because I think this is like pretty much the last form, isn't
Yeah,
it?
right? Let's go back. Let's see. Inspections, there's an inspection addendum. The well addendum, the septic, we did those.
I guess
That one for
wood
that
burning stove
anymore.
one, but that's kind of,
Yeah. We can hit that another time. Hardly ever comes up anymore, right?
Mhm.
Most of them been taken care of.
Mhm.
Occupy.
yeah,
Oh, that's a big, long one.
yeah. We can
Maybe
also-
next time.
Yeah, we could do a whole thing on.
Yeah, we
occupancy
can do
power.
those next time.
Pretty- Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Any questions from the forums today?
No, thank you guys though.
Good. Any questions otherwise, just about anything?
I'm good for today.
I think I am as well.
All right, thank you all.
Awesome.
Thanks for
All right.
attending.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for coming. Did you guys see my Slack post today?
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll have a picture of what you can win.
Sweet. Excited.
It'll be in my office. So you guys can look at it and go, oh, I really want that. Tomorrow I'll take a picture and I'll state what it's worth, and that'll really incentivize you guys. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you all tomorrow if you're at the small group. And then I got, my MAPS coach invited me to fall masterminds last week, so I added that to the calendar. It is a class that we have to pay for. So I'll be watching it myself in here, and if you want to come, you can come join me. I can't share it because I will be on a Zoom to watch it. Does that make sense? And it's a great, Fall Masterminds is about your business and just everything that like we've been hitting, right? Prepping for the fourth quarter, doing all the activities to get really rolling for the first of the year. So we'll be hearing from different leaders at KWRI. All right.
When did you add that to the calendar?
Last Thursday, when I got it.
I look ahead at the calendar and put it on my calendar, and that wasn't there. And I made all kinds of appointments for Thursday afternoon after we usually.
Oh, it's all morning, 8 o'clock in the morning until 1.
I know, but
Yeah.
driving to Portland and then get back here for
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
for 1:30.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, well, in lieu of the, because it runs into our workshop class, that's getting, we won't have that, and we won't have a mastermind either.
Right. I
Um,
have it.
But we will have masterminds and everything, again, next week. Okay,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Ciao.